Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this panel. Thank you very much for joining us for discussing blockchain and AI issues in professional training. I'm glad to have with us Jeff Bandman, Ioannis, and Professor Spyros Makridakis. Recently, back in July-August 2019, we launched a series of professional training courses at the University of Nicosia. Jeff led the first one course on blockchain law, regulation, and policy, and many others are following. I'm glad to be here to discuss with our distinguished instructors issues related about these courses. I'll start the discussion asking about the aim of your course, Jeff. Could you please tell us in a few words what is the aim and the main goal?
Yeah, sure. So the course I taught was on, as Marinos said, on law, regulation, and policy for blockchain and digital assets. And it's actually a pretty big topic, and it's really kind of a fast-moving and evolving thing. Like, so for example, there's not really a textbook, so just compiling the materials and curating them so the students could make sense of them was itself, fairly significant task. So the aim of the class, first of all, it's aimed at kind of professional people, lawyers, policymakers, regulators, people working in financial services firms, auditors, accountants, legal advisors. The principal objective of the course was to give them a framework for understanding what's happening in the world of regulation, law, and policy in this area. And it can be very confusing, frankly. There's a lot of new terminology, a lot of what's written in the media often oversimplifies things or kind of, exaggerates what's going on. And so the aim of the course was to give the participants the opportunity to look at primary source materials. What are governments saying? What are regulators saying? What is the industry saying? What does this terminology mean? And to enable them to make sense and have a framework, to see that there are actually very common and simple themes. Taxation, of course, governments are concerned about, where are they raising money? Anti-money laundering, things like, are these new types of assets and technologies being used for, criminal activity? And then what sort of safeguards are there to protect it? And really, the aim was to take what can seem like a really confusing set of material and break it down so that the students had a coherent framework to view it with. And the last part of the objective was also to identify who are the significant actors in the space. So typically, if you work in an industry, you understand who are the main competitors, who are your regulators, if you have regulators. With this, there are national authorities, there are international bodies like the Financial Stability Board, the G7, the G20, the Financial Action Task Force. So part of the aim of the course was really to identify who they were, what their lanes or areas of interest were, so that students could make sense of it both during the class and going forward.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Ioannis?
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Decentralized and the University of Nicosia for having me here. So the course that I will be teaching from November ongoing, it will be about the disruption that is coming through blockchain technology in the energy sector. So primarily, the aim of the course is to teach to students, to participants, what are these sectors within the energy context that will be disrupted by blockchain technology. The course mainly addresses issues related to real use cases in the energy sector. As we know, the energy sector nowadays is ongoing a continuous transformation. Digital transformation is present in every single aspect of a utility, of electrical utility, as well as new technologies like IoT, cybersecurity, AI, constantly take a lot of time to participants in these organizations in order to transform the business. So the main purpose of the course is to start from a very high level description of the power system, what we are saying, what we are meaning, where we are talking about a power and electrical system, and then how this system is being transformed into a smart grid. So many people tend to compare what is happening right now in the electricity sector with what happened with the mobility sector. So the old traditional power grid is like our old landline telephone line, and the smart grid is our mobile phone. So the course will start by investigating what is the power networks, what is a smart grid, and how blockchain technology disrupt these areas. Specifically, we're going to look into detailed, let's say, use cases, real use cases, and real platforms that are already implemented worldwide in the energy sector. We're going to discuss about a very interesting use case that is peer-to-peer energy trading. In Greece, from June 2020, the energy exchange is going to start. So peer-to-peer energy trading within, let's say, the scope of local energy communities is of high importance. Other use cases that are already being materialized right now worldwide have to do with smart charging when it comes to electrical mobility, electric vehicles, as well as renewable energy. There is a target of the European Union, a very, let's say, optimistic target to have 20% of the energy mix of the European member states to be covered by renewables by 2020. That's a very optimistic target. So the share of renewable within the energy mix is quite important. So the increased penetration of renewable in the energy sector is another issue why we should use blockchain technology. And throughout the course, we are going to demonstrate why is it very much important to introduce in the energy sector the blockchain technology, as well as to also follow up on what Jeff said. Regulatory framework in energy is very crucial. Utilities worldwide have a very rigid and, let's say, not that flexible regulatory framework. So part of the course will be to see the limitations of the way blockchains have been structured until today and how these can be evolved into technologies that can be embraced by the energy stakeholders of the electrical utilities and the energy sector in general.
Thank you very much. Spyros, what is the main aim of the course you are leading?
Well, it's not a course on blockchain. IIF has two parts. One is the whole area of decentralized blockchain, another is looking about the future. So this is a course about the future, and specifically a course of how we forecast the future. And a lot of people don't understand very much about forecasting. They think that it's fortune-telling. Well, it's not fortune-telling. And in the last 40 years, we have done a lot of work to try to show very specifically what we can forecast, what we cannot forecast, and most importantly, what is the uncertainty in what we try to forecast. For instance, you can try to forecast blockchain, Bitcoins, or you can try to forecast Coca-Cola. It's much, much easier to forecast Coca-Cola, how many bottles of Coca-Cola it's going to be sold, or how many tubes of toothpaste, than try to forecast Bitcoins. This we all understand. Bitcoins can fluctuate in one single day 10 or 20%. That's not what is going to happen with how many toothpaste are going to be sold. So we have been doing a lot of what we call empirical work. In other words, trying to test how well we can forecast, what we can forecast, what are the factors that determine forecasting accuracy, how we can improve forecasting accuracy, and then every time we make a forecast, one thing is certain, this forecast is never going to be exactly correct. So it's going to be some deviation from reality. And what is very important, and the second most important thing about forecasting, about the field of forecasting, is to be able to measure the uncertainty. And that's what we're going to do in this course, which is called Applied Forecasting. Try to pass all of the knowledge that we have in this growing field and very important field because forecasts are needed for everything that we do. All of our decisions about the future need some kind of forecasting. So we try to determine the rules of what we can forecast, what we cannot forecast, what are the best methods to forecast, and what's going to be the uncertainty in our forecast. Now, lately, and something that relates to blockchain, there's a lot of work being done on how we can forecast using artificial intelligence, or what we call machine learning, or deep learning, or cross-learning. There's a lot of things going on right now, and there are a lot of people spending a lot of time trying to introduce, to go beyond the traditional forecasting methods, which are statistical, to new ones that are based on artificial intelligence. And there's a lot of work being done. And one of the things we try to do, and we're going to do in the course, is to say when these methods work, when they work better than traditional statistical methods, and what we can do to improve forecasting and uncertainty. One of the things, we have found a lot of things, but one of the things that we have found with very, very strong evidence is that the accuracy of forecasting improves if you take more than one method, you forecast using each one of these methods separately, and then you combine their forecast. This thing improves forecasting accuracy considerably and also reduces the uncertainty. So there are a lot of things like this that we have learned, and part of what I have been doing and what I have been doing for the last 4 years is to organize some competitions where we take real data, we give it to experts, and we ask them to forecast. And then we try to find out which one of the experts or methods forecast more accurately than others. Lately, we finished a competition last May. It was the 4th competition, and we used 100,000 time series. We gave them, at least there were 60 experts who participated. We got their results, and we evaluate them, and we found out that the most accurate method was one guy called Smile, who works for Uber, whose forecast was the most accurate of all. And the way that he managed to do it, he managed to combine traditional statistical methods with new machine learning methods, and he improved the accuracy. Also, he improved the uncertainty in the forecast. They came very close to specifying uncertainty, which was extremely close to the theoretical level of uncertainty. So what we'll do then in this course, basically we pass the knowledge and experience we have about forecasting to those who would like to take the course. Okay. It was mentioned before that there is no any book talking about regulations in blockchains. Well, there are a lot of books concerning forecasting. And one of the best books, I don't want to brag myself, is one I have written in '89. It's in the 3rd edition right now. It's called Forecasting Methods and Applications. It has something like 6,000 citations, okay? And it's a book that we're going to use a lot in this course, together with a lot of material, because I have been very active in publishing in the field of forecasting and how we can improve forecasting accuracy.
Thank you very much, Spyros. Ioannis, you mentioned before that one of the case studies you are planning to explain during the courses will mention the peer-to-peer trading in Greece. Do we have the legal framework? Are we allowed to do so from a legal perspective?
The short answer is no. There is no, let's say, regulatory or legal framework to perform peer-to-peer energy trading. But still, as we said, energy is a very particular sector. So regulatory changes can come in a very, let's say, slow pace. But still, if we look around the European Union, there are still countries like, for example, the UK or the countries of Benelux, where the regulation is more flexible, so it allows, let's say, in a local energy community level, to apply peer-to-peer energy trading. And it's one of the most, I think it's the most famous use case in the energy sector. So how peer-to-peer energy, for example, works is like, okay, I have on my rooftop a solar panel. So I'm out for vacations in the month of August. My solar panel still produces electricity. So instead of not using the electricity provided by my solar panel, I can sell this portion or the whole electricity produced by the panel to my neighbors. This will reduce the energy consumption on a neighborhood level and in the same time reduce the coal that's going to be burned in some distant power factory, and in the same time give to the owner of the rooftop solar some income for the excess of the electricity, of the renewable electricity that was sold. These are the most typical use case. This use case actually is going to be one of the real-world examples that we do in the course of this program. So we will develop smart contracts that are going to realize a local peer-to-peer energy trading market and see how the dynamics of this market work and what is the outcome of such a peer-to-peer energy trading algorithm.
Can I add something here? Well, a lot of work is being done on how we can forecast electricity consumption. And it's in particular interesting because now that we have managed to predict weather pretty well for the next 3 days, by knowing what will be the weather, what will be the temperature, we can use this in the forecasting equation to improve the accuracy of electricity consumption. So this is a big area in forecasting, energy forecasting in general, but electricity in specific, and in particular short term, the next 3 days, for instance, that we have very accurate predictions about temperature. Okay. Now, an interesting thing is most of the work in the area of forecasting, the good work, the academic work published in a journal that's called the International Journal of Forecasting. And the new editor-in-chief is someone who is very much involved with energy forecasting. So we're going to expand this field. Okay.
Jeff, who will you recommend this course to?
So I think the course on blockchain and crypto asset law, regulation, and policy, there's I think a few kind of target groups who I think it's useful for. Definitely for lawyers and legal advisors, whether they're in an outside law firm or they're within a company that is being affected by blockchain, digital assets, digital currency, things like that. People who work in financial services firms. Really anywhere in the world. For regulators and policymakers, this course really helps give them a framework and grounding in just, again, the context, and helps them benchmark what other regulators are doing. I'd say then kind of auditors, accountants, compliance professionals. I think more and more people are in their professional lives just starting to be affected or will be very affected by the law, regulation, and policy around this. And for people who think, well, maybe this is too complicated, this is really meant to be kind of a gateway or entry point. And I think things like the announcement of the Facebook Libra coin, which is could be considered a stable coin, that took place in June, and then the reaction that regulators have been having to it is really a case in point how these things are not just remote eventualities. These are things that affect people in their personal and business lives, and are going to have wide-ranging ramifications. So I think it'll have utility for a lot of different types of participants.
Excellent. Ioannis? Same question about your course.
Yes. The way that this course on blockchains and energy was structured is to be self-contained. So it starts with an overview of the power grid, of the traditional power grid, with the transformers, the generators, and so on, and then how this grid is transformed to the smart grid. And then we see how blockchain technology is applied to the smart grid. So in terms of the course being self-contained, this course is addressed to people with an ICT background or an energy background that would like to, let's say, get deeper into the details of the application of blockchain technology in the energy sector. So it can be, let's say, be helpful to people from domains of ICT and power engineering.
Excellent. Spyros?
Well, the course is mostly geared for businesses, okay? And within business, practically every manager has to do some kind of forecasting. Now, some are doing much more than others. The retail business requires a lot of forecasting. Okay. When you go to the supermarket and you find the product that you want, it's not by chance that it's there. Somebody has planned for that. And they have planned to have some extra amount of what you want to buy, what we call the inventories, so that the supermarket or any retail store will not be without the product that you want to buy. Now, you tell me why they don't put too much, because if you put too much, it costs a lot of money to store it. You need it to have warehouses to store it, and there's a lot of complications that if you to store more than what you need, it's going to cost you more money. So they try to find a balance between having enough products there, but not having too much, okay? So that would be one area. Another area is any manager who wants to do a budget. In order to do a budget for next year, you need to make a forecast of how much you're going to sell, what would be your cost, and a lot of other factors. So anyone then who needs to make a budget needs to know what would be the most appropriate forecasting method. Also, he or she will have to know how much money will have to involve in order not to run out of money. Okay, because sometimes you can forecast more than what you're going to get. Sometimes you're going to forecast less, so you have to have enough cash to do the difference. There are several other areas that are going to be are using rather forecasting. Okay, for instance, you know, the whole area of energy, it's using forecasting to a great extent. Okay, and there are several other categories that I don't think that at this point we need to get into it. But basically, in the whole area of business, you need to forecast.
Excellent. Jeff, how can the potential participants benefit from this course in regards to their work?
Well, I think that you know, there's a lot of different businesses and organizations where you know, having kind of some knowledge and insight in this area will help people. Perhaps they're being considered for promotion, or perhaps to kind of demonstrate to their you know, colleagues or superiors that they're ready to take on some new responsibility. You know, this is really a rapidly changing area, and it's also you know, it's an area where because it's so new, it's not as if in any organization there's somebody who's become the domain expert and has 10, 20, or 30 years advantage over you. Whether you're a very experienced worker or, you know, relatively new to the workforce, you know, you have the ability to become a subject matter expert, you know, relatively, you know, relative to other people because it's new. And what this course does, again, it gives you a framework, you know, whether, you know, something like AML, know your customer, is important to what you're doing, or taxation, or capital markets, or trading. You know, really, in each of these different areas, the regulators are looking at them, they're very active, and so you don't have to be working for, you know, a cryptocurrency company. Our whole economy around the world is being shifted by, you know, by blockchain and crypto assets. And I'll give you another example. So, you know, in Europe, there's been recently enacted this very important privacy regulation, the GDPR, General Data Privacy Regulation. In California, in the US, they've just enacted a privacy regulation that's very similar. So now people are trying to figure out, you know, well, what is the impact, and, you know, how do you reconcile, blockchain and things that use blockchain technology with these privacy regulations? What about, the right to be forgotten? Who is a data controller or a data processor? What obligations apply to whom? And this regime is just now being rolled out in Europe, and in fact, it's with some complexity, because although there's a general data regulation across all of Europe, in each country they have a privacy regulator that's doing its own interpretation and implementation, and there's supposed to be convergence, but at the same time, there's room for individual member states to have differences. So if you're somebody who's focused on issues around privacy or technology implementations, again, this course gives you the tools to make sense of GDPR as it applies to blockchain, and we actually look at what the specific data privacy regulators in specific member states are saying about this. So again, it's giving people a toolkit. This is an area that's evolving, but it gives people a framework to make sense, and so that can be lawyers, compliance people, advisors, all kinds of people.
You mentioned tools. Do you use any kind of software tools during the course?
Yeah, so one tool that we make available and give students a hands-on experience is a tool called CipherTrace. And this is, you'll hear people talk about how, one of the attributes of Bitcoin or Ethereum or many other crypto assets is that they're on a distributed ledger, and that ledger is visible and immutable and transparent. And so, these companies have developed actually these very user-friendly software tools. So the students in the class got access to log into this CipherTrace tool. And with that, you go on to the actual, look at transactions on the Bitcoin blockchain or other blockchains. You can trace transactions back. You can see how things move through different wallets. You can learn how to do risk scoring. So these are real tools that are used by regulators, law enforcement, enforcement people, compliance people in banks. So, this is the kind of thing that it sort of demystifies. This probably, some of you may be kind of highly skilled technologists who are already very advanced at kind of parsing the blockchain. But for most people, it seems like, wait, well, how can I do that? And in fact, it's a user-friendly, accessible tool. The students in class were given assignments where they had to trace specific transactions and specific wallets a certain number of hops back to figure out what was going on, and everybody in the class was able to do it. And so at the end of the class, you could say not only have you learned about the law and policy and regulation, and you've learned the fact that these digital assets are traceable, but you've actually learned how to trace it yourself. So that really, I think, differentiates you from a lot of other people who haven't had that experience.
I think that was a great insight we had. I attended your course this summer, and I was really impressed by the tool and the ability you give you to trace the transactions and go back. Ioannis, coming back to your course, what benefits will the potential participants get from the course?
Yes, right now, if we look back, let's say 5 or 10 years, let's take a look at the European funded projects under the FP7 on the Horizon 2020 platform. So most of those projects were mainly focused on, let's say, renewables, demand response policies. But if you look at the calls, it is what actually the Commission, the European Commission requests from energy-related calls nowadays, is to have an aspect towards decentralization. So from my point of view, it's very important for an engineer right now in this era that is working within a utility environment or is working with a utility to have also a clear view on the blockchain, on the decentralized way things are working now and will be working much more in the near future. So as an example, I would say that we also going to use a tool within the course of the blockchain and energy program that we are going to simulate the way actual markets work on a local level. For example, we're going to have, let's say, a small community, for example, of 10 or 100 houses with their own storage, battery storage, their own rooftop solar, and to see how these houses, how these residents can interact with each other over an energy and peer-to-peer energy trading market. So this is the first step before going forward and implement these market mechanisms via blockchain technology. We used to say that a good engineer within a utility is a good power engineer, but right now things have radically changed. So we're now talking about the integration of the worlds of IT, information technology, and OT, operation technology. So in this view, this course gives a different view of the way we've been doing traditional day-to-day business within the utility environment. So we address issues from a different point of view that will be definitely be day-to-day business in the next 5 or 10 years within the utilities.
Spyros, the average duration of these professional training courses we deliver is 6, maximum 7 weeks. Why a short online course be beneficial for participants?
Well, it's interesting, but there's a lot of work being done about our judgment and how good is our judgment, okay? And if you go, for instance, to a salesman or to a manager and ask him or her how many units of, let's say, whatever you sell, you're going to sell for the next 3 months, what do you think is going to happen? 90% of the time, you're going to get a forecast that's going to be over-optimistic. And we know this from a lot of experimental data. People are optimistic, okay? So one of the things then that we try to do is we try to introduce some objective way to make the forecast. So instead of asking a manager how many units you're going to sell, you come and you say, look, I did the best I could with my statistical or machine learning methods, and this thing is what I think you're going to sell. Now, how you think you're going to change that, how you think that this forecast is going to change, and what will be the reasons that you're going to support the change that you're proposing. So when you do this, we put what is called in judgmental psychology an anchor. You don't let this person go too far up or too far down. So there are a lot of little tricks like this that we use in practice to try to improve the accuracy of forecast. Because judgmental methods is just the base. Then you have to adjust this by things that they are not in the past, things that they are going to change. And we try to find ways then to improve this process. Also, what we try to do is to try to make them understand the level of uncertainty in what is their forecast, okay? And you need some time to be able to do that. You need to go slowly, and this is one level. Another level, for instance, the new competition that we're going to do that's going to start in January, the M5, we're going to get data from Walmart. You know how many forecasts Walmart does every week?
No idea.
More than 10 million.
Oh.
Now, if you have to make 10 million forecasts, you have to have some systematic way to be able to forecast for each one of the products. Walmart is the biggest company in the world, and they sell millions of products, and they have thousands of stores in different places all over the world. Now they have to make a forecast for every single one of these items to determine how much inventories to keep, okay? So all of these things are part of a package, and we're going to talk about all of these things in the course. Okay.
Jeff, could you please give us more details about the delivery mode and some information about whether we have a recorder or live sessions? What kind of material is available for the students, for participants?
Yeah, sure, Marinos. The course is designed for people who are professional and who will we assume people are hard at work at other jobs, and so they can kind of consume it on their own time. So as I mentioned, there's not a textbook. The materials for the class are articles or white papers that are published by different regulators. Often it'll just be kind of an excerpt so people can just kind of look at those. And so for each week, there will be kind of an overall PowerPoint lecture which which I've prepared, which walks through and gives an overview of the materials. There's also the reading, and there's kind of assigned reading and background reading if people have extra time or if they're particularly interested in the subject. Then we also have a live session once a week where all the students get together and they can participate via chat or they can talk, and that's kind of an interactive section. So, I'll go through, but it's not meant to be a lecture. It's meant to be more like a seminar discussion format. We also have chat rooms. So, different threads can start, and, sometimes those can be fairly active, others, less so, or, it's a place also, like one of the things that we discovered during the course was that, new things were coming out, daily or weekly, and so it was a place, in the beginning I was posting things, but as the class went on, the students would see them, right away, and they were sharing them with others as there were kind of regulatory developments, and so we had kind of chat about that. Then each week there's an assignment which, it's great. It's a pass-fail because it's a certification course, but some of them are just kind of one-word answers. Others are, things just, to give their opinion about something or whether they agreed with what some policymaker said that, I think students probably spent, an hour a week working on the assignment, which was graded pass-fail. So it's really kind of a mix of things. Then I also mentioned that the cipher trace part of the course. So this is this, web-based tool, and so the students got kind of special training in how to use it, and then they accessed the tool and did the assignment. And in fact, if they, in addition to doing the assignment, I think some of them just sort of got into it and started, tracing other things and looking up different, actors that are in the space to sort of see what their risk scores were, and so people had some fun with that as well.
If I may add something to what Jeff just said, from my point of view, and I want to highlight this, is like the importance from my end of this course is a live session once a week, so it's not pre-recorded. This, from my point of view at least, gives me the freedom to adapt the course for the next week based on the questions and feedback received by the participants during the current week. This is also liberating for me because I know I will address in the next week any open issues or topics needed by the participants to be tackled more. So I think this is a very interesting aspect of these programs.
Spyros, what is the average workload we have in your course per week?
Well, we haven't done the course yet, so we have to decide about this. But we're going to give enough work. And one of the things we're going to ask the participants to do is to come with the data from their own companies.
Okay.
So they're going to play with real data. Now, one of the things we have managed with these competitions that we are doing is we learn what is the best method. Now, in addition to this, we have all of the best methods, the programs that they're deposited in a platform that's called the GitHub, where anybody can go and use them for free. So these people then, not only they can play with their own data, but they can find out which of the methods will best predict their data and best determine the level of uncertainty for their data. Okay. Now, for the M5 competition, the new competition, we're going to run it through another platform that's called the Kaggle platform. Kaggle has 4.5 million members. So what we hope that's going to happen, we're going to get something like 2,000 or 3,000 people who are going to participate in the competition. Now, these people will try to find the best way to forecast and the most precise way to determine uncertainty, because we do both of these things. And then this information will become available for our courses. Okay. So it's not only that we're going to give them specific information, but we're going to ask them to bring their data to do actual forecasting using their own data and the best methods for programs that are going to be available for them for free.
Thank you. Do we offer any certificate for these courses? Certificate participation of attendance?
Yes, we do. They're going to do some work, again, using the data from their companies or the data that we're going to have available from the M competitions so they can use this data to try to learn how to forecast using specific forecasting methods that they best fit their data. Okay.
Great. Jeff, as an industry expert, what do you predict to be the future of blockchain-related regulation, let's say, and law in the next coming years?
Yeah, I think it's going to become more and more visible and more important. Like there's, right now, there's a lot of divergence among different countries, jurisdictions, and I think there's also a lot of misunderstandings in the general population. Like I think that there are people who think, well, aren't cryptocurrencies illegal, or aren't governments about to ban them? And in fact, I don't think that's the case. And the example that I point to is, and this is one of the first things I talk about in the class, is after the U.S. government seized the Bitcoin from something called Silk Road, which was this dark market that was operating in kind of the up till 2011, 12, 13, and got shut down, and that really was a criminal enterprise. And so what the U.S. government did with the Bitcoin it had seized, they auctioned it off. And it said, this is the same thing the government does if they seize a house, or if they seize a motorboat, or they seize things like that, they auction it off. If they seize narcotics or automatic weapons, they don't auction those off to the American people. So to me, something like that just illustrates these things are legal, they're accepted, and in fact, it's so routine in the U.S. government and the Bulgarian government and the Australians and lots of, it's not even newsworthy when this happens. So I think that there's going to be a lot of regulatory developments, both at the global and kind of jurisdiction by jurisdiction level. We'll have a world where there are some areas where there's a lot of convergence, like around anti-money laundering and know your customer requirements. There will be a lot of areas where there's divergence, where there's room for experimentation, and different countries will take different approaches, both in terms of crypto assets and how those are traded, how those are custodied, how those are exchanged, as well as with blockchain technology itself, and with things like with data privacy and things like GDPR. With smart contracts, are they going to be enforceable? What is going to make these Ethereum or other smart contracts have legal certainty around them? So I think this is going to become an increasingly important area, and some of the things that my colleagues on this panel have been talking about, there's not today kind of a clear legal framework for peer-to-peer trading of energy, for things like with blockchain when it might be used in combination with the Internet of Things. These things are going to be increasingly important in terms of commerce, and so I think these regulatory and policy and legal issues are going to be with us for some time to come.
Thank you very much. Ioannis, how do you see the evolution of blockchain in energy?
Yeah, from my perspective, once, let's say, regulatory aspects have been resolved, the one thing from my point of view that I foresee for the next years is to treat energy as a commodity, a tradable commodity. We have seen this already. There are already not proof of concepts, but actual projects around the world where people can just trade the renewable energy produced on their rooftop. There is this concept of renewable energy certificates. So a renewable energy, for example, certificate is a certificate that 1 megawatt hour of energy was produced by a renewable park or a wind park and so on. So this 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy, once it's certified, means that it cannot be double sold. It can be traded as a commodity. So one thing that I foresee is new business models in the sector of the energy. We have also to consider new revenue streams coming from disruptive technologies using blockchain, from electric mobility. We're going to see mobility as a service. There is a forecast, like for the next, let's say, in the next 10 or 20 years, it will not be beneficial for you to have your own car, rather to have mobility as a service called your Uber. Your Uber will transport you from your house to work, then you take your e-scooter and go to the supermarket and so on. This requires a decentralization of the way payments and energy will need to be carried out. So I think a huge disruption in the energy sector in this respect.
What kind of new business models can we see in this area?
As I said, it's energy as a commodity, tradable good. Renewable is one aspect. Electromobility, it's the second one. Also, we can see a lot of use cases in the areas of flexibility markets. Flexibility markets is, in terms of the energy sector, is someone requesting from you to reduce your consumption during the day and sell this flexibility back to the grid. We will see also electric vehicles selling electricity back to the grid. It's called vehicle-to-grid service. So there are a lot of business models that will have the prosumer, the consumer producer in the center, and not the utility. There is a study that right now utilities spend less money on infrastructure if we compare them to the total number of consumers worldwide. So consumers, prosumers, on their behalf, they spend a lot of money investing in the energy sector. Who would imagine 30 years ago that in the backyard of my house I will have a small power plant with my storage unit, with my renewables, and so on?
Thank you. Spyros, last question. What kind of prediction can you do for the forecasting in the future?
That's a good question.
How can you forecast the forecast?
Yeah. Well, as I said before, there's a lot of effort right now to figure out methods that are based on artificial intelligence. We call them machine learning, deep learning, and cross-learning. And they are new, and there are a lot of people working, a lot of great mathematicians, a lot of physicists. They leave the field of physics, and they go to forecasting, and they try to apply methods that they use in physics. Uber, for instance, you talk about Uber, one of the top managers in Uber is a physicist, okay? And we're going to see, because up to now we have managed to improve forecasting accuracy and the precision of uncertainty up to a certain point, but we have reached a plateau, and we need a step change. And hopefully, and we do a lot of work, as a matter of fact, in the University of Nicosia, as you know, Gary is working 100% of his time trying to apply deep learning and cross-learning to improve forecasting accuracy. And hopefully we're going to reach the point that our research is going to improve considerably what we're doing up to now with traditional statistical methods. So it goes towards this direction. And we're going to see, hopefully, a big step change in terms of improving forecasting, the field of forecasting.
Thank you very much. Last but not least, would you like to tell us a few words about the Makridakis Center at the University of Nicosia? What is the aim, the goal?
There's a lot of Makridakis, there are a lot of them. One of them is the competitions that I started in 1970. Yeah. And they keep going, and the idea is how we improve forecasting accuracy, how we improve the field of forecasting in general, but with objective, actual data, not by saying, you know, what we think. Now, the next thing that, as you know, our CEO, Ioannis Polemitis, is pushing is we try to take this knowledge we have gained and disperse it and make all of the people know about it. And part of what we're doing is doing these courses. So how we can take the knowledge that we have accumulated and make it available to everybody. So that's the idea.
Thank you very much. I think we have time for 1-2 questions from the audience. Any question to the panelists? Yes?
Thank you. So what theoretical or technical background is required to attend each course of the 3?
Very good question.
For the law, policy, and regulation, no prerequisite other than open mind and curiosity.
Ioannis?
Well said from Jeff. The same. So it's, as I said, it's a self-contained course. So will not need any prerequisite or experience in neither the energy sector or nor the ICT.
Just to read and write and have the will to do work, to learn.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Okay, I guess it's time.
Okay. Before closing, I would like to thank you for participating in this discussion. I would like to thank my panelists, Jeff, Ioannis, and Spyros. And short announcement for the audience. We decided as blockchain training, let's say, team to offer a 25% discount to all the participants of Decentralized. You can pass by our booth on the first, on the first floor or floor above, and then you can discuss with our representatives how you can claim this 25% discount. Thank you very much.